and this is Brewed Awakening, serving fair trade coffee, tea, and speakers to stir the social conscience, and I can guarantee that's going to happen tonight with my friends Gabriel and Jeanette Salguero. And I have some student friends who are going to introduce them in a second. The speaker series, the Brewed Awakening speaker series, is part of work that we do to get students plugged into important social movements and social issues. We think of it as some of the prophetic work of the church to be able to name injustice, to be able to plug into the being a more just people and places where the justice of God is at work, right? So you'll see the Jesus with no hands up here. This picture is from Johannesburg, from a Catholic church in the middle of Soweto, called Regina Mundi, where the anti-apartheid movement, where people worked against the injustices of racial oppression in South Africa was happening. There is also a Jesus just like this on 32nd and Imperial. I challenge you to go take a drive out to 32nd and Imperial here in San Diego, where at Christ the King, there's a Jesus who, this Jesus, his hands aren't there because during a police raid, some of the police shot off one of the hands. They took the other one off and they left it. In San Diego, a parallel story, someone stole Jesus' hands and the priest left them off, and he puts a sign underneath that in Spanish says, "No tengo manos más que las tuyas." Or in English, "I have no hands but yours." So Brewed Awakenings and the work of the Center for Justice and Reconciliation are about what does it look like to be the hands and the feet of Christ in the world, particularly in the places where people are marginalized. So welcome tonight. I want to give a quick, our speakers are here for the weekend, and Reverends Salguero are here, and where's Katie? Katie is going to come and introduce. This is not the only time you'll get to hear from our speakers. She's going to quickly tell you about another opportunity.
Hi, so I'm Katie Dexter. I know some of you guys, and I work in chaplaincy ministries with Tim Whetstone, our chaplain, and I'm his intern. And so this weekend we have an opportunity with our speakers tonight, Gabriel and Jeanette. They're sharing this weekend. Tomorrow, our retreat begins. It's called Riposo, which means rest in Italian. And we'll be sharing with them this weekend. They'll be sharing a lot about their heart and their ministry, and it will be a time to obviously rest and a time to really just have some time in fellowship. So we begin tomorrow. Our registration starts at 5, and we officially begin at 7. So registration's still open. We have some people who have registered already, and we would love to have you guys come and just spend some time in fellowship and with, obviously, Gabriel and Jeanette. So you can come by spiritual development if you're interested in registering still. If you want more information, you can speak to myself or Tim, other people in spiritual development as well. And you can come, if you can't make it to Saturday, it goes until 3 p.m. on Saturday, then you can just come for Friday night. We would love to have you there. And then if you can come to both, that's even more awesome, obviously. The cost is $35, but there also are scholarships if you need help. And yeah, we'd really love to have you guys come. So come see me or Tim if you want more information. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Through the Center for Justice and Reconciliation, we have students directly and in leadership and involved in 3 distinct social movements, one of which is immigration and racial justice, which we're going to hear a lot about tonight. Another of which is worker justice and fair trade. You know that we're just this close to being a fair trade campus, and that you all voted in a fair trade fund to help us become, as a university, a university that looks through its supply chains, look through the companies that it hires when it brings products and services to campus, and helps to ensure that there's no slavery, there's no oppression in those supply chains, right? It's tough work. There's a lot of research and a lot of work to be done, but we're working on that. And then the third thing is human trafficking. Maybe some of you are interested or have heard about the work we do through Beauty for Ashes. Beauty for Ashes is our student group on campus where we have research and activism around human trafficking. And I'm going to invite our 2, we call it Welcome the Stranger, which is sort of more scriptural here, and it is our internship in immigration and racial justice. And Cristina Marcial and Adrian Calderon, they're going to introduce our speakers tonight and also say a few words.
Hello, buenas noches. Good night.
My name is Cristina Marcial,
My name is Adrian Calderon.
and we're both the Welcome the Stranger interns.
Yes, we are. And yeah, I'm so delighted that you guys are here. I'm so delighted that you've come to hear people who we are inspired by to speak on such issues that are, part of like this system that we're part of, this nation and stuff like that. And so we're very thankful. I also would like, I'm getting myself better now. I would also like to thank you guys for like helping us out like with like series of things that we've been a part of, such as films on immigration and La Posada, the fair trade sort of thingy. Like I'm really thankful if you guys ever made sort of one of those luminaries where you guys wrote down something on sort of a bag, a lunch bag. And so I'm really thankful for that. You guys don't think it's just the most beautiful thing when we can honor someone who. That the remains were just found in bones, and in some ways we give them like a Christian sort of way of burial, which is very important within the Christian tradition. And so I'm really thankful for that. I'm really thankful for all the stuff that you guys have been a part of, for helping us, and just for allowing us to become not just a club, but a friendship and sisterhood and brotherhood, and in an issue that is just 30 minutes down, just like down like Highway 5, and so I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, thank you for putting up with my emails, for all of us who got them, with reminders for the event, and not, spamming me. I appreciate that. We want today's the Brewed Awakening. The title of today's Brewed Awakening is the Christian, Latino, Latina, politically active, bringing the life of faith and activism together for the common good. Our speakers tonight, as you've heard, it's Gabriel and Jeanette Salguero. And the first time I heard them was at the Justice Conference 2014, a couple of months ago. And they were just inspiring, and I'm sure you all are in for a great treat tonight to have them here with us.
Something that still remains from the Justice Conference, and I will never forget when Gabriel said that he said he can speak philosophy and he can speak ghetto. And that, in a sense, that brings a lot of insight into what he's going to speak about tonight. Wait, what happened right now? And so it's so true. And he mentioned like the work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther King and how important they were to our society, and how those issues we can bridge today into our society here in the United States. So maybe we can welcome
Please
them.
join us in welcoming them.
Yes, please.
That's right.
You like the Yankees?
Oh no, I'm not a fan. It's a lot about
You can
marriage.
tell a lot about marriage by who they root for. She is a person of great faith, but rooting for the Mets.
Pride comes before the fall.
Hello, and just
Hola,
so glad to be with you all.
estoy contentos de estar con ustedes.
It's been some years since we've been here at Point Loma,
Unos años que hemos estado aquí en Point Loma
and we always love to come here
y nos encanta estar aquí.
because it's a great place,
Porque es un lugar lindo, maravilloso,
filled with great people,
lleno de personas lindas.
and God is at work in you and through
Y
you.
Dios trabaja en ustedes
I
y
wanna-
por ustedes.
I want to thank some of my friends who work here and
Quiero darle gracias a algunos de nuestros amigos profundos.
I will not mention them because if you forget one person, then
No
you
los voy a
feel bad.
mencionar porque
You
si
know
no
who you
se
are.
uno,
And,
olvídate.
and the older I get, the more I forget.
Y entre más mayor él se pone, más me olvido.
I definitely wonder about a few things. Number one is, if my wife doesn't like what I'm saying, she will translate something totally different.
Si no me gusta lo que él dice, yo digo algo diferente.
So,
Pues
that's just the way it is.
así es como es.
You'll get used to her, I have. I want to share a little bit about our journey
Queremos compartir un poquito de nuestra jornada
and what brought us here.
y qué nos trajo aquí.
Jeanette and I have been married for 12 years.
Hemos estado casados por 12 años.
In about month and a half, it will be 13 years.
Y como en un mes y medio, 13 años.
It's a tribute to her to put up with me. We have two beautiful boys,
Tenemos dos niños lindos, lindos.
John
John Gabriel,
and Seth, 8 and 5.
8 y 5
We
años.
pastor a wonderful congregation
Y pastoreamos una congregación muy linda
that worships in 3 languages,
y adoramos en 3 lenguajes,
Spanish, English, and Mandarin.
español, inglés y mandarín. En Hao.
And my mom, Shisha, and all that good stuff.
Muy lindo, muy lindo.
And we think that God is in the business
Dios está en el negocio
of celebrating
de
diversity.
celebrar diversidad.
And there's a radical difference between tolerating diversity
Y hay una diferencia radical en tolerar diversidad
and celebrating
y
diversity.
celebrar diversidad.
Tolerating me is,
Tolerarla es,
come into my house,
ven a mi
you
casa
can sit in this corner.
y siéntate en esta esquina.
Celebrating
Celebrar
me is when I come,
es cuando yo llego,
you have a big cake,
tú tienes una torta grande,
you have balloons,
tienes globos
and you celebrate
y tú celebras
what that different group brings to the table.
lo que ese grupo diferente trae a la mesa.
The church and society
La iglesia y la sociedad
has to move from tolerating to celebrating.
tienen que moverse de tolerancia a celebración.
I don't want to be tolerated.
Yo no quiero ser
Nor
tolerante,
do I want to tolerate you.
ni yo quiero
I
tolerarlo a
want to
usted.
celebrate
Yo quiero celebrarle
who you are,
quién eres tú,
who God made you,
quién Dios te hizo,
and all the gifts
y todos los dones
and beauty that you
y
bring.
la belleza que traes.
If we learn the mystery of celebration,
Si aprendemos el misterio de celebración,
reconciliation is easier.
reconciliación es más fácil.
Because when you celebrate people,
Porque cuando celebras a persona,
you're looking for the beauty,
tú buscas por la belleza,
the strength,
la fortaleza,
the contribution,
la
the
contribución,
radical difference
la diferencia radical
that shows the breadth of God's
que
creativity.
demuestra la amplitud de la creatividad de Dios.
And something I'm learning this year,
Y algo que estamos aprendiendo en este año,
let me be clear,
déjeme estar
I
claro,
haven't learned it, I'm learning it,
no lo he aprendido, lo estoy aprendiendo.
is to move from tolerating to celebrating,
Movernos de la tolerancia a la celebración,
where we not just create space for other people to come in.
donde no solo creamos espacio para que otras personas
We
lleguen,
say this space is equally yours as it is mine.
donde decimos este espacio es igualmente balanceado el mío como tú.
And that's tough.
Y eso no es fácil,
That's very tough
eso es muy difícil,
because it's sacrificial.
porque es sacrificial,
It requires me surrendering something.
requiere que yo rinde algo,
It requires me to change my living arrangement.
que yo cambie mi forma de vivir,
I may have to move the furniture around.
quizás tenga que mover la
I
fornitura,
may have to paint a wall here or there.
pintar una pared aquí o allá,
And that's hard
y eso es difícil,
because to celebrate somebody
porque para celebrar a alguien,
without diminishing myself,
sin disminuirme a mí,
it's not just creating
no
space,
es solo crear espacio,
it's sharing space with equanimity.
es compartir espacio con
And
balance.
that's really, really, really
Y
hard.
eso es difícil,
Really hard.
difícil.
So that's what I'm learning.
Y eso estamos aprendiendo.
Dr. Gates
El doctor Gates
asked us to share a little bit about this journey,
nos pidió que hablásemos de nuestra jornada
whether it's on immigration reform,
en la reforma migratoria,
racial reconciliation,
reconciliación racial
or any of the justice work we do.
o cualquier trabajo de justicia que hacemos.
Tomorrow in chapel, I'm going to be speaking about the prophet Micah.
Mañana en la capilla voy a estar hablando del profeta Miqueas,
Those 3 famous refrains from Micah:
los 3 refranes famosos:
to do justice,
hacer justicia,
to love mercy,
amar misericordia
and to walk humbly before your
y
God.
andar humildemente delante de Dios.
Today, I just want to talk about one of them and how that impacts Jeanette, I, and my kids.
Hoy queremos hablar solo de uno y describir cómo impacta a nosotros y a nuestros niños.
The phrase of doing justice.
La frase de hacer justicia.
So here are some of my concerns.
Aquí están algunas de nuestras preocupaciones.
We're concerned that justice is sexy.
Estamos preocupados que ahora la justicia es un poquito sexy.
You know, sexy, no, o sea, no, nos preocupa bastante.
It worries us significantly.
que el trabajo de justicia está
That
a la
the work
moda, en boga.
of doing justice is now in vogue and it's in style.
Y a veces cuando hacemos las cosas porque están a la moda,
And sometimes when we do things that's in style,
simplemente porque están a la moda,
simply because it's in style,
perdemos la sustancia,
we lose the substance,
la esencia,
essence,
el ADN de lo que es
the
justicia.
DNA of what justice work really is.
Y nos podemos mover rápidamente de una cosa a otra cuando cambia la moda.
And we can move quickly and shift quickly when styles change.
We can quickly change
Podemos movernos rápido
from one thing to another
de una cosa a la otra
when it loses its cachet,
cuando pierde su caché
its cultural currency.
y su peso cultural.
So I'm part of justice work because I think that's at the heart of who God is.
Y yo soy parte de la justicia, trabajo de justicia, porque yo pienso que ese es Dios.
I am not a Christian activist.
Yo no soy un activista cristiano.
That is a redundancy.
Eso es una redundancia.
I'm a Christian.
Say it again, say it
Yes,
again.
yes. I'm a Christian.
Yo soy cristiano
And that's why I act.
y por eso yo actúo.
Because my actions rise out of my discipleship.
Porque mis acciones son de mi cristianismo.
One day I was being interviewed on a television station that will remain nameless.
Un día estaba siendo entrevistado en una televisión
Fox
que no
News.
vamos honey.
And underneath, waiting anytime, baby. And underneath they put whatever, Reverend Gabriel
Y
Salguero,
debajo,
Pastor Gabriel.
the tagline, pusieron el reverendo Gabriel Salguero.
And instead of putting, pastor of church,
Y en vez de poner pastor de la iglesia,
they put Latino activists.
Latino, and we gave them,
And we gave them the way we wanted to be introduced.
y se los dimos.
Let me tell you what labels do.
Déjeme decirle lo que hacen las etiquetas.
They either empower you,
O te empoderan, te dan poder,
if you use them in service of people,
si lo usas para el servicio de las personas,
or they're used against you to dismiss you.
o son utilizadas en contra de ti para rechazarte.
So if I come to the table
Si yo llego a la mesa
in my ministerial Christian identity,
con mi identidad ministerial,
I am heard in a different way
soy escuchado de una manera diferente
than if I come as Latino activist.
que si vengo como un activista
And let
latino.
me be clear,
Déjeme estar clara,
that too is a vocation and that too is a calling.
eso también es una vocación, un llamado.
But everything I do,
Pero todo lo que yo hago,
everything we do,
todo lo que nosotros
is
hacemos,
bathed in our followership of Christ.
está bañado en nuestro seguimiento de
We
Jesús.
do it because we're trying to follow
Lo
Jesus.
hacemos porque estamos tratando de seguir a ti.
We are totally sold out.
Estamos completamente de lleno.
And so justice work.
Y el trabajo de la
I was
justicia,
talking to Eugene Cho a couple weeks ago.
estábamos hablando con Eugene Cho hace
He
unas
says
semanas.
he like us
Él como nosotros
is concerned
está preocupado
that justice work
que el trabajo de la justicia
is somehow divorced,
está divorciado,
is somehow
desconectado,
segregated
está segregado
from discipleship and spiritual formation.
del discipulado y formación espiritual.
My justice work,
Y el trabajo de
the
justicia
justice work of the church,
de la iglesia,
of young evangelicals and Christians around
de
colleges and
jóvenes
universities,
evangélicos, universidades y colegios alrededor,
should always rise out of the center of discipleship and spiritual formation.
tiene que salir del centro del eje de formación espiritual.
We do it
Lo hacemos
because we're Christians.
porque somos cristianos.
And my grandmother used to say,
Y mi abuela cantaba,
"They shall know we are Christians by our love."
nos conocerán que somos cristianos por nuestro amor.
And love
Y el amor
in society
en la sociedad
is demonstrated as justice.
es demostrado como justicia.
Love
El amor
in society
en nuestra sociedad
is demonstrated as justice.
es demostrado como justicia.
Dr. King used to say,
Dr. King
"Do
decía,
not tell me you love me
no me digas que me amas
if you cannot treat me as your brother."
si no puedes tratarme como tu hermano.
My favorite philosopher,
Mi filósofo favorito,
she,
ella,
from a few decades ago,
de algunas décadas,
Tina Turner, She's not my favorite. You know who my favorite is. Whitney Houston. Or Marvin Gaye is a close second. But Tina used to ask,
Tina preguntaba,
what's love got to do?
¿y qué tiene que ver?
You don't know this? I'm 40. Do you know this song? What's love got to do? Got to do with it. What's love but a second-hand emotion? Oh, what's love? The reason Tina asked that way
El motivo por la cual Tina
is
preguntaba,
because she was a victim of domestic abuse.
ella fue víctima de violencia doméstica.
Y'all know the story. Many people know the
¿Saben?
story.
Ustedes saben la historia.
So when you are a victim of oppression or abuse,
Cuando eres víctima de opresión o de violencia,
the question of love comes to the surface.
la pregunta de amor sale a la superficie.
What's love got to do with it?
¿Y qué tiene que ver
And
eso
for
con
a
amor?
lot of us,
Y para muchos de nosotros,
love is like some mushy
el
emotion,
amor es como una emoción
some amorphous sentiment,
y un sentimiento amorfo.
but that's not Christian love.
Eso no es amor cristiano.
In the Bible,
En la Biblia,
love is always manifest
el amor siempre se manifiesta
in concrete action.
en acción concreta.
For God so loved the world that
Por
God
cuanto
gave.
Dios amó al mundo que dio.
Love is an action.
El amor es una
And
acción.
King would say,
King decía,
if you say you love people,
si tú dices que ama a las
you do not
personas
give them justice,
y no les da justicia,
you do not know what love is.
no conoces lo que es el amor.
So that's what brings us to this.
Y por eso estamos aquí.
We love people
Amamos a las personas,
because that is the commandment.
porque ese es el mandamiento.
Love God
Amar a Dios
and love your neighbor.
y amar a tu prójimo.
In the same way you love
En la
yourself.
misma manera que tú te amas a ti mismo.
Love your neighbor.
Ama a tu
Your
vecino.
black neighbor, your Mexican neighbor,
Vecinos
Jewish
moreno,
your Muslim neighbor.
hispano, judío, chino.
The modifiers
Y los
do not end.
modificadores no terminan.
The neighbor that looks radically different from
El
you,
vecino que parece radicalmente diferente,
that votes radically different from you,
que vota radicalmente diferente,
that goes to a different school and lives in a different socioeconomic reality.
que va a una escuela diferente y vive en una realidad socioeconómica diferente.
Jesus is clear.
Jesús es claro.
Love your neighbor.
Amar a tu prójimo.
And whatever's in front of that word neighbor doesn't matter.
Y lo que está al frente de esa palabra vecino no interesa.
Rich neighbor, poor neighbor.
Rico o pobre,
Educated neighbor,
educado o no,
illiterate neighbor.
analfabeta.
Jesus says love.
Jesús dice, amaos.
And if you love your neighbor,
Y si tú amas a tu vecino,
you want her to have justice.
tú quieres que ella tenga justicia,
You want her to have equality.
que la tenga en igualdad.
But Christianity is radical
Y el cristianismo es radical,
because it doesn't just tell you to love your neighbor.
porque no te dice que ame a tu vecino solo.
It's this other commandment.
Hay otro mandamiento.
Love the stranger.
Amar al forastero.
Stranger. The
Forastero.
Greek word for stranger
La
is
palabra griega para el forastero es
xenos.
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 Xeno. Right? How many of you saw my big fat Greek wedding? You guys are young. You're young, but just bear with me. You know, she was Greek, right? I mean, really Greek. Her dad was really Greek. They had Greek statues on the lawn. They were like almost stereotypical Greek
Griego estereotípico.
film, right? They kind of exaggerated as all kinds of films.
Exageraban un poquito.
And she started dating a guy who's not Greek.
Y comenzó a salir con
You
un
remember?
muchacho que no
Anybody
era
remember
griego.
this?
¿Te acuerdas?
Trust me, that's how the movie goes. It's not rented.
Así va la
After
película.
midterms, rent it, okay?
Finals.
Finals. Oh, finals, yeah, sorry. I'm glad I was here to get you extra credit. Look, I have no delusions of grandeur. I know why you came. I used to be a college professor. I get it. She was gonna marry. She's dating a guy who's not Greek.
Y estaba saliendo con un muchacho no griego.
One of my wife's favorite scenes in the movie is when they baptize him in this little kiddie pool.
Cuando lo están bautizando.
Yeah, you have to see it. And in this little kiddie pool, and
En una
it's just,
piscina chiquitita.
Anyway.
Eso es así, así.
you have to see it. And the dad is upset.
Y el papá está enojado.
You know why he's upset?
¿Sabes por qué está enojado?
Because the man she's dating and gonna marry is not Greek.
Porque el hombre con quien ella está no es griego.
Sad Bassel, my dear Jamaican brother, friend,
San Basso, nuestro amigo jamaiquino,
said the question of Christianity.
dice, la pregunta de cristianismo.
He's an African Jamaican, he's black.
Y él es moreno, jamaiquino moreno.
He told once an all Caucasian crowd, he said,
Y le dijo a una audiencia totalmente anglosajona.
the question of Christianity
La pregunta del cristianismo
is not whether I can be your brother,
no es si yo puedo ser tu hermano,
but if I can be your brother-in-law.
pero si puedo ser tu cuñado.
You get that, right?
¿Entiendes eso?
Can I marry your sister?
¿Puedo casarme con tu hermano?
It's radical.
Eso es radical.
And the dad was upset.
Y el padre estaba
And
enojado.
she's coming up the stairs,
Y ella viene
and he gets into this argument,
y él está argumentando.
and she says to dad,
Y ella le dice a su padre,
but I love
pero
him.
yo le
I
amo.
love him.
Yo le amo.
And the father says in Greek,
Y el papá dice en griego,
es xenos.
es senos.
Es xenos.
Es senos.
He's a stranger.
El forastero.
He's not one of us.
Él no es uno de nosotros.
Es xenos.
Es senos.
The Bible doesn't just say love your neighbor.
La Biblia no solo dice amar a tu prójimo.
Matthew 25
Mateos 25.
says you must love the xenos.
Tienes que amar al senos,
Love the stranger.
al forastero.
Because justice work
Porque el trabajo de
is
justicia
loving the neighbor.
es amando al vecino.
That could be easy,
Eso puede ser
but
fácil,
love the stranger.
pero amar al
It's a
forastero,
whole different dimension.
eso es una dimensión totalmente diferente.
And then Jesus really gets,
Entonces Jesús llega aún más allá.
he creates, just so you know, I read some books, existential angst, like Kierkegaard would say.
Como Kierkegaard dice, un problema
Un
existencial.
problema existencial, angustia existencial a la Soren Kierkegaard.
Sorry, Kierkegaard.
Love your enemies.
Ama a tus enemigos. Ouch.
That, can I be honest with you?
¿Puedo ser honesto?
Say yes.
Yes. Okay.
Sure. That's the hardest piece of justice work.
Ese es el trabajo más difícil del trabajo de
How
justicia.
many of you ever watched the news
¿Cuántos han visto las noticias
or something and you find yourself
o algo
something that you feel is
difícil,
profoundly unjust
profundamente injusto,
and you find yourself yelling at the television?
y te puedes conseguir gritando,
If
enojado?
not out loud, at least in your mind.
Enfadado.
How many of you actually yelled out loud? Maybe that's just a Puerto Rican thing.
Quizás eso es algo como latino, kind of like,
You have a Ricky Ricardo moment. Mira cómo va a ser que tú vas a hacer esa cosa. And we,
y nosotros,
you,
ustedes,
my Christian sister or brother,
hermanos, hermanas
my
cristianas,
non-Christian sister or brother, when you get involved in justice work,
cuando te envuelves en trabajo de justicia,
the greatest temptation is to demonize people who do injustice.
la más grande tentación es hacer demonios los que hacen injusticia.
You have this John and
This-
James moment.
Un momento de Santiago y Juan.
God,
Dios,
Lord,
Señor,
do you want us to pray
¿tú
for
quieres que
fire
nosotros mandemos fuego
to come down from heaven?
del cielo?
Anybody ever want to pray for fire?
¿Alguien quiere orar por
On
fuego?
a particular person?
Una persona particular.
Right, in this general
Don't say the
area.
name.
Don't say the name, just God, just in this general vicinity, just
Señor, en este vecindario, acá,
Lord, fire for this political party.
Señor, fuego para este partido político.
As a Christian,
Como cristiano,
doing justice is important.
hacer justicia es
But
importante,
equally important is how we do justice.
pero tan importante es cómo la hacemos.
Because methods matter.
Porque las metodologías son importantes.
Motivations matter.
Motivaciones son
It's
importantes.
not just what you do,
No es lo que tú haces,
but why you do it.
pero por qué lo haces.
That's why our work must be baptized.
Por eso es que nuestro trabajo necesita ser bautizado,
Submerged, yes, drowned. in love.
sumergido, ahogado
Because if not,
en amor, porque si no,
you want to bring down fire.
tú deseas traer fuego.
You, in your righteous indignation, and let me be clear,
Y en tu enojo, claro,
there's a difference
hay una diferencia
between righteous anger
entre enojo justificado
and condemnation and destruction.
y condenación y destrucción.
Justice work must always be constructive.
El trabajo de justicia siempre construye.
You destroy things,
Se destruyen cosas,
but you must build something in its place.
pero hay que edificar en su lugar.
It's easy
Es fácil
to denounce injustice.
denunciar injusticia.
What's hard is
Lo
to
que es difícil,
pronounce the justice that should take its place.
pronunciar la justicia que debe tomar el lugar.
Create alternatives.
Crear alternativas.
Paint pictures of an alternative reality.
Pintar retratos de una realidad alterna.
Imagine a better world,
Imaginar un mundo mejor,
even while you denounce the injustices of the present world.
aun cuando tú denuncias las injusticias del tiempo.
So Jeanette and I,
Pues Gabriel y yo
we've been arrested a few times.
hemos estado arrestados unas cuantas veces. Whose turn is it now?
It's yours, definitely yours. Definitely yours. When somebody's arresting you
Cuando alguien es arrestado
and is cursing at you,
y te maldice
calls you spick,
y te llama speck,
you want to lash out.
tú quieres gritar,
You want to get angry.
tú quieres enojarte,
But more than angry, you want to do violence.
pero a veces más que enojo quieres hacer violencia.
Your heart screams,
Tu corazón grita,
am I not a man standing here?
no soy yo una mujer parada aquí,
Am I not a human being?
no soy yo una humana.
When you deport thousands of our sisters and brothers,
Cuando deportas miles y miles de mis hermanas y hermanos
you separate them from their children,
y los separas de sus bebés
and you cage them like
y
sardines,
los encarcelas
box.
como sardinas en una caja.
your soul wants to say,
Tu alma desea decir,
are those not people there?
no son humanos ellos.
Is that not somebody's mother, father, sister, brother, daughter, or
Es esa la
son?
mamá, el papá, el hermano, la hermana, el hijo de alguien.
And rage and violence
El
and
enojo,
vengeance,
la violencia, la venganza,
all the tools of injustice,
todas las herramientas de hacer justicia
they bubble up inside.
están adentro de ti.
Because injustice likes to replicate itself.
Porque la injusticia le encanta duplicarse.
It likes to contaminate even the people who fight against it.
Encanta contaminar aún las personas que pelean contra de ella.
I was working on some work, I won't tell you the state,
Estaba haciendo un trabajo
Alabama,
no les digo el estado, Alabama,
about immigration and living wages.
de inmigración y de ingresos balanceados,
Salarios justos, just salaries.
salarios justos.
And I'm doing something in the street,
Y estoy haciendo algo en la
and
calle.
in the evening we have a conversation, a dialogue
La noche tuvimos una conversación, un diálogo
inside of a church.
dentro de una iglesia.
Pastors
Pastores
and leaders
y líderes
and elected officials.
y algunos amigos.
And as I'm speaking,
Y mientras hablaba,
somebody gets up in a church
alguien se levanta dentro de la iglesia
and said to me,
y me dijo,
you, sir,
tú
are a pinko communist. I'm like,
eres un comunista.
labels
Etiquetas
that people use
es lo que las personas usan
to dismiss you.
para echarte afuera.
When I feed people,
Cuando alimento personas,
I'm a saint.
soy un santo.
When I ask why they're hungry, I'm a communist.
Cuando pregunto por qué tienen hambre, soy comunista.
I'm neither, by the way.
No soy ninguno de ellos.
But I was mad.
Estaba enojado.
I wanted to lash out.
Yo quería gritarle de nuevo.
And just then I heard the voice
Y oí la
Dr.
voz
King and Dieter
de
Bonhoeffer in my
Dr.
ear.
King y Dieter Bonhoeffer.
You must overcome evil with good.
Tú tienes que vencer a la maldad con la bondad.
Overcome capacity for cruelty with your capacity for kindness.
Capacidad de crueldad con tu capacidad de bondad.
What I'm concerned about
Lo que me preocupa
is that when justice work just becomes a vogue or something cool to Twitter into Twitterati,
es, es cuando el trabajo de justicia está en vogue y se puede tuitear. I just made that up.
you lose the spiritual power
Tú usas el poder espiritual
of Christian love.
del amor cristiano.
In the end,
Y al final,
love does win.
el amor gana,
It wins.
gana,
It wins.
gana,
But you have to do it the right way.
pero tienes que hacerlo correctamente.
There's a lot of injustice,
Hay muchas injusticias
and it's easily to be overwhelmed.
y es fácil ser
But what I
sobrecargado.
want to share with you this week, this
Pero lo
day, 2 days and a half that we're here,
queremos compartir con ustedes estos 3 días que estamos
Es
con
what-
ustedes.
St. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 10:4.
Es lo que Pablo escribió en 2 de
This
Corintios
is the message I
10:4.
want to share with you, then I'll open it up for whatever.
Y lo abro.
The weapons of our warfare,
Las armas de nuestra milicia
they are not carnal,
no son carnales,
but they are mighty through God
pero son poderosas en Dios
for the pulling down
para la
of strongholds.
destrucción de fortalezas.
We do not fight
Nosotros no peleamos
the way other armies do.
como otros ejércitos,
What we do
porque nosotros
is we
hacemos
take our swords and beat them into plowshares.
es tomamos nuestras espadas y las funcionamos para trabajar.
What we do,
Lo que hacemos,
our weapon is love, grace, truth, forgiveness.
nuestras herramientas es amor, gozo, perdón, paz.
What Paul was telling them,
Lo que Pablo le decía
that urban multicultural church in Corinth
a
was,
esa iglesia multicultural en Corintios.
we can't seek peace the way Rome does.
Nosotros no podemos buscar paz como lo hace Roma.
The Pax Romana is my way or the highway.
La Pax Romana era mi manera o afuera.
And we will make peace through violence.
Y haremos paz por violencia.
Paulo Freire was right.
Y Pablo Freire estaba correcto.
In the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, the second and third chapter.
Pedagogía del oprimido en capítulos 3 y 4.
If the oppressed
Si el oprimido
take on the tools of the oppressor,
toma las herramientas del que oprime,
they become the oppressor.
se convierte en ese el que oprime.
What's love got to do with it?
¿Qué tiene amor que ver con esto?
Absolutely everything.
Totalmente todo.
Because justice work
Porque el trabajo de justicia
without love
sin amor
is blind vengeance and narcissism.
es venganza ciega y narcisismo.
So let me be honest with you.
Déjeme ser honesto con ustedes.
I don't always want to lead with love.
No siempre queremos andar y dirigir con amor.
And that love is not absence of anger. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be angry
Y el amor no significa estar ausente de enojo
or denouncing injustice.
o denunciar injusticia.
But there's a super spiritual thing.
Pero hay algo más profundo espiritual.
A theologia crucis, a way of the cross.
Una teología crucis, un camino a la cruz.
We who are in the middle of Lent on our way to the resurrection.
Nosotros que estamos en medio de la cuaresma, camino hacia la resurrección.
We sit in the brokenness of Christ.
Nos sentamos en la rotura de Cristo
And somehow we find that there's power and redemption there.
y encontramos que hay poder y redención allí.
Dieter Bonhoeffer,
Dieter Bonhoeffer,
on his sermon,
en su sermón.
The Cross of Christ and the Remembrance of the Dead,
La cruz de Cristo y el acordamiento de los muertos.
says,
Dice,
wherever death is close,
donde está la muerte
the
cercana,
resurrection is also near.
la resurrección está cerca.
So where you see injustice,
Donde tú ves injusticia,
remember,
acuérdate,
where sin abounds,
donde el pecado vive,
grace abounds
sobrepuja la gracia.
even more.
Amén.
Thank you for your time.
Gracias por su tiempo.
So you have the privilege in the next 20 minutes here to ask some questions. You'll hear our guests, our friends tomorrow in chapel preach the word strong and hard, and as prophetic as you heard it tonight. But tonight, you get a chance to ask them just about anything you want. About their life.
About anything.
About
Just about
anything.
We complete the fed.
That's right. They can say no.
And please, if you have a question, tell us who you are, huh? Names matter. The first one is always the toughest.
Right?
Yes, sister.
Hi, my name is Evie, and I just wanted to ask you.
Your name?
Evie.
Evie, nice to meet you.
I just wanted to ask you how you entered to that path. Something that like changed your life, with your heart to go into that path.
That's a great question. Her question, Evie's question, thank you, is how did we enter to that path? Jeanette, do you want to start?
Yeah, I grew up in Brooklyn, born and raised in Brooklyn, New Jersey. And in the projects. And I remember as a little girl, I lived on the last floor. And as a little girl, I remember the screams of women. Pretty much on a weekly basis. The screams of women. And I would ask my mom, why are they screaming? Why are they screaming? Why are they screaming? And I lived almost my entire adolescence in that apartment complex. And it was about 11 years old that I realized that on a weekly basis, girls were getting raped right above my room. And that's where that righteous indignation began. Can you share yours?
I think, so whatever you read in the biography when a speaker comes, I don't know what they put up about us or whatever, but that,
Yeah.
let me tell you the real story. That's the, people usually tweet or put on Facebook their victories.
Yeah.
Rarely do they talk about their pains and frustrations and brokenness, right? That's why people live for so much social media depression, because they actually think that what people are putting on social media is their real life, and they say, oh, look how great their life is. People rarely share their brokenness on social media. They put on their best face. My dad was a homeless man who was a heroin junkie. He started using drugs when he was 11, smoking, smelling glue and all kinds of stuff. My dad learned to read in prison. He was illiterate, right? So somebody found him in prison, a woman. They call her a prison, now they call them chaplains. Back in those days, she was a prison missionary who taught him how to read and told him, your life can change. My dad later became a pastor and started rehab programs all over the country and soup kitchens and all kinds of stuff. And my dad, who's still alive, said to me, Gabe, don't you ever forget that everything you have is a gift of grace. Pay it forward. Yes, sir.
My name's Ashton Pickle.
Ashton?
Yeah. What did you get arrested for?
Which time?
Whatever, I'm not going to
Yeah. So I'll give you one that most of my friends really like. I once got arrested for protesting why churches could not run from public schools in New York. Civil disobedience.
Talk about civil disobedience.
Right, Henry David Thoreau is probably one of the, you guys could read Henry David Thoreau on Walden Pond, right? It talks about when the laws are broken, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his letter and papers from prison around paragraph 7 says, hey, what do you do when everything underneath your feet is unjust? What happens when laws are unjust? Right? What is the moral woman and moral man to do when the law is unjust? When the law is broken? For example, immigration. But in the Shoah of Germany and Holland, right? The law was you cannot protect Jews. So you break that law, because that law is immoral, and you hide Jews. Because you and I answer to a higher authority. In the words of Archbishop Thomas Wensky of Miami, he says, we cannot suffer from legal positivism. Just to think that something is a law makes it right. It was once legal to hold black people as slaves. It was once legal that women could not vote. Right? So when a law violates scripture and conscience dictates that you must, as a witness to God's grace, truth, and love, do civil, the key word there is civil, right? Nonviolent disobedience. So I got arrested for immigration issues. When they were deporting dreamers, like you throw away people, that's not acceptable to my conscience. Good people can disagree on this issue, and I'm willing to have that conversation. We can sit down and reason together about what Scripture says how you should treat a stranger. I'm all open to that. I love conversation. But I have a conscience, and I have a gospel that I hold dear. And that gospel trumps laws that shatter people. So I once did civil disobedience over the schools of America and dictators being trained in the Americas. Shall we continue? Thank you, Ashton. Great question.
I'm here and then I'm here.
You moderate that.
Yeah.
You're okay. Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Corey.
Corey?
Yeah, I have two questions.
Can you stand, please?
How did you guys meet, and then how did you start doing your preaching work together?
Yeah, baby.
We have two different stories.
Hold on. Let me just say
Of course you
something.
do.
There's her truth, my truth, and the truth. Okay.
Because of where we lived at, we moved to New Jersey.
Yeah.
We moved to New Jersey. Things got so bad where we lived at that we had to flee.
Tell her why you had to flee.
Really?
Just not the whole.
Okay. I come from a mafia family. So all of my uncles have been in prison. A lot of them are still in prison and will be doing life. So I come from a very long lineage of mafia, starting from Puerto Rico, my great-great-grandfather. And it just traveled on. So there was a hit on our family, a very large hit. So we had to move to New Jersey, to a small town called Lakewood.
Yeah.
Lakewood, New Jersey. So we ended up in this town where I saw the pastor's son eyeballing me.
I will correct
We're
that.
high school sweethearts.
Junior in high school.
We're high school sweethearts. We started dating at age 16, and we've been together 24 years.
Let me tell you what really happened. I was playing the trumpet in the church. I used to play the trumpet. And she walked in and she was like, wow. What a hunk of a young man. And the rest is history.
I will say we were engaged twice.
Oh boy, that's not necessary.
We were engaged twice, and apparently he wasn't ready. So, okay, so then I sold the engagement ring.
Don't clap that.
And I moved to Africa.
And I groveled for a year and a half and I got her back. That's a true story. She did sell that first engagement ring. Let me just say, I wasn't ready. Let me just say, guys and gals, men mature most of the time much later. We're just children sometimes. And I didn't know a good thing when I saw it, and I was just emotionally infantile. But thank God for God's grace that I matured and begged her for a year to come back from Africa. But guys, you know how it is. We can just be kids sometimes. And we can talk about that another time. Thank you for asking,
I
Corey.
think there was a question there.
Yeah, my name is Sammy, and I saw a video of you on, and you were in El Punto with Jorge Ramos, and he asked you you're one of the forefront in the Hispanic reform, but you're a pastor. How can that be? And I found your answer fascinating. I wanted you to elaborate on that. And then another thing to go with that is, like when we're like people of faith, and the society we live on, we're told that we shouldn't mix state with church. How do we go about that? How do we go about,
Great question.
Thank you, Sammy. So, the Jorge Ramos, I know all of y'all watch Spanish, Telemundo and Univision. Jorge Ramos is like Wolf Blitzer for the Spanish world. He's he's Colombiano, I think. He's very tough interviewer, very tough interviewer. So what I think I told him, this was like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, right? I think the question is the inverse. Not why am I involved, but as a Christian, how could I not be involved?
Civil rights and activism in your form of social work.
That's a good question. Thank you for asking my anonymous friend. I think justice work will never be passé. As long as injustice exists, we got to work for justice. Wherever there's injustice, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, exploitation of labor, right? There's so many issues, and none of us can do it all. That's why we need a whole church, a whole body of Christ, right? So what I hope is that the church will be able to transcend partisanship and make it more a biblical, ethical movement. Like Wilberforce did with slavery in the UK, in the United Kingdom. That, by the way, he fought for over 10 years. That didn't happen overnight, right? So I think one of the things that I have to be careful as a pastor is I don't let people put me, I'm not a civil rights leader. I'm a Christian. And when the Republicans are wrong, I'm going to say, thus saith the Lord. And when the Democrats are wrong, I'm going to say, thus saith the Lord. And if people want to politicize that, there's nothing I can do. But I need to work out of integrity. People, you can't control people's interpretations. You can't. All you can control is what you do and how you do it. People will call it one thing or the other. I think that the next great move, where I see a lot of movement, especially among young evangelicals, is around human trafficking. I see a lot of good, promising work there. It's a global pandemic, modern day slavery. I see a lot of good work around there.
And it's not so politicized.
And it's not as politicized, so people feel safe, right? The problem with being a prophet is that you end up dead. And now we don't kill you physically. We kill you on social media and Twitter.
And in parentheses, let me say this. Gabriel and I are threatened consistently to the degree that we've had to have cops practically live with us and escort my children to and from school. So this is not easy work.
And at the end of the day, what is good? St. Augustine, City of God, Confessions. What is the summa bonum? What is the highest good? Micah. God has told you more what is good and what the Lord requires. He's not asking.
Requires.
God requires of you. But God is not asking you. God requires that you do justice.
That's what the Bible
It's not an option. It's not the 10 suggestions. It's the 10 commandments. Right? God requires it. I didn't write the script. I'm just reading it. To do justice. To love mercy. The third one's probably one of the hardest for justice people. Walk humbly before your God. So people are going to label it. People are going to partisanize it. And that's just part of being a prophet. If you're a prophet, you do justice work, they're going to kill you on social media. You know, people have written articles about me, and they've never had the decency to interview me. I'm like, hey, I'm here. Just ask me. It's fundamentally unfair. The work of justice for this generation is to wherever you see a broken place in the world,
Amen.
bring light.
Amen.
And you may die for it. Your reputation may die. Your influence may die. But the question is not, do I want to be popular? That's the question of political expediency. The question is not, do I want to be famous? That's the question of pride. The question is, do I want to do right? That's the question of the disciple.
JD, you let us know.
You let us know, because I could go. This is I live for this.
Yeah, we will be done no later than 8:30.
All right,
so we can
I'm
get you some
here.
sleep for tomorrow morning's chapter, all right?
It's like, what time is it for us?
11.
How about we take, let's see,
2 or 3 more.
3 more? Does that be all right?
You select.
Oh, I get to choose? All right, how many of you still want a question? I'll just try and be fair. All right, we got 3 right here, so that's right. I'll just go 1, 2, 3.
Jonathan, I just wanted to ask you about your congregation, and earlier you spoke of its diversity and all of that. I was just wondering if they are as passionate as you two were, and has there been situations where it might have separated the congregation or situations like that?
Absolutely. I'll say that the average age of our church is 30. Age 30. We see a lot of articles where a lot of young adults are leaving the evangelical world. That's not our reality. Our reality is that we're going on to 3 services, and I'm praying to God that we can rent a bigger place. To God be all the glory. Because our congregation is so young, they are hand in hand with us in social justice. Hand in hand with us. We are very well loved and very well supported by our congregation. They know the work that we do. When we started pastoring the Lambs in Manhattan, it was an uphill battle. I don't know if you want to get into the details of it, but because of the justice work that we do, and we are national leaders, a lot of people were not in agreement with that. We entered the congregation and there were about 12 members in it.
12 attending members, right?
12 attending members.
8
And
adults
4 of
and 4
them,
kids.
yeah, and 4 children. It grew to the degree that we couldn't fit anymore, and then we started growing nationally. We lead an organization that's called NALEC, the National Latino Evangelical Coalition. As soon as we started leading that organization, we lost, I don't know how many members.
Yeah, there's a book by Mark Toulouse called God and Public. Toulouse,
Right.
T-O-U-L-O-U-S-E. He's a Canadian church historian. There's a difference between public person and public church,
Right.
right? So the African American church is a great example of public church. We could learn a lot from them, you know? They mobilize congregations. It's not just a leader or a person. They're much more into movements than they are into protagonism or just, you know. Yes, Dr. King was the face, but they were moving church. That Montgomery bus boycott was supported by churches. You know, Selma, I mean, these were churches. So, not everybody likes what I do. The church, we started it was really a church restart. Most of the people who are there now came under our pastorate.
Right.
So they bought into, this is, but that's not the only, I don't preach justice every Sunday in my church, you know, let's go rally. I talk about broken marriages, I talk about discipleship and prayer, you know. Holistic. I talk about worship, you know, I read Nowin because I had 2 former members who were like Nowin experts, one of them sitting right here on my left-hand side, you know. And, you know, I'm holistic. So not every Sunday I'm like, yeah, no. Some Sundays, you know, I'm talking about, you know, whatever, you know, prayer and the disciplined life. I'm not, you know, that's a caricature, you know. And I pray, and I'm a real pastor, for real. But there's a difference between public church, and I think the evangelical church in America has a way to go. From public leaders, individual voices, to public churches, where churches take hold, entire congregations of gospel movements, to use Tim Keller. Although Tim Keller has a much more narrow understanding of it.
So at one of our services, and instead of having a worship service within the four walls,
Yeah.
we took busloads to
to
DC.
DC on a Sunday.
On a Sunday.
And
that
we
was
sang,
our
we
church.
sang hymns in the bus,
All
and
4.5
took up an
hours.
offering for 4.5 hours, and then we marched.
March, and then we drove right
And
back.
marching is also worship.
My name is Caleb,
Hi, Caleb.
and I think I asked this on behalf of a lot of us here probably, but I'm wondering in what way we can be specifically praying for you two after just hearing all this from you guys.
For the protection of my babies.
I think, thank you for asking that, Caleb.
Thank you.
Caleb means God's loyal one.
Yes.
I think there are great temptations in this work.
Yeah.
That we would always point to Christ. That we would be humble, not pseudo-humble, that we would be humble. And we have to pray for that, because this work
Seductive.
is seductive in its cult of celebrity. One. Number two, that we will be discerning on how we use our time, and we will be stewards of Sabbath and rest. And number three, that it would be a revival of justice that catches fire. So it's not a handful, a couple hundred, but thousands of people who take Micah serious. Is that all right? Thank you. I will kiss you when this night is over.
I'm Amanda.
First person I met today.
Yeah, I've lived in San Diego my entire life, in a pretty tight-knit community, East County. And where I grew up, it was mostly whites and Latinos, and I've just seen so many my friends, family members who can't get work anymore because they don't have they're not actual citizens, and just seeing them waiting on street corners, and I know them, and I've had dinner with them, and I guess I just wonder how I'm supposed to support my friends when their family members can't get work, and just how I can be there for them, and just different. Yeah, it's just.
So thank you, Amanda. So this work of biblical justice that has social implications. Somebody say, oh, social justice, that's not in the Bible, right? Neither is don't smoke, but it still kills you, right? One is, man, we have to be careful that we don't have a messianic complex. We can't save everybody. There was one Christ, and they crucified him.
One Savior.
That being said, we can't, neither take the messianic complex, nor can we sink into the despair of inaction. Each person can do what God has empowered her or him to do. One. Number two, connect with people who are already doing work, because that raises your work exponentially. Right? So now that there's a national organization, but we partner with the Evangelical Immigration Table. Every young person here, there's something called G92.
G92.
It's immigration reform movements for Christian college campuses. I've done one already at Northwestern National University, at Sanford, where they come and they speak to college students about a biblical theology of immigration. And you get that through the Evangelical Immigration Table. evangelicalimmigration.table.com or .org. It's one of those. Okay, right? There's international worker justice that's working on human trafficking, modern slavery, right? There's so many people who, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? can collaborate, right? And those are national, but then there's local ministries, right? And you have options, compassionate ministries like ESL, citizenship classes, advocacy, right? I was talking to somebody today about the Constitution Project that defends people who have no money. It's finding what God already has. Moses, what do you have in your hand? And most of us don't know. So create, maybe even as a small group, a database of Christian justice ministries that young people can tap into and collaborate with. And then on a smaller scale, replicate it in their home church or in their home, or even in their college campus or small group ministry. Because Jeanette and I started this work, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We still don't have much of a clue, but God is gracious. But we found mentors and people who were doing it for years, to learn from what's out there.
Speaking of Sabbath and rest,
Yes.
we need to let our guests go back to their hotel. So thank you so much for your patience tonight. Let's thank our guests.